We're going over ways to end commander games for 5 mana or less.
I'm Mia, and I love putting +1/+1 counters on my Esper Sentinel.
I'm BZ, and I love a good, cheap, efficient win condition. If you want to support us in our win condition-y Esper Sentinel endeavors, you can go to Patreon. You can give us money directly, pick your favorite tier, and then you get some exclusive content that you literally cannot see anywhere else, and some merch for your troubles. And if you want to maybe support yourself at the same time as us, that's totally viable too, because you can go to coolstuffinc.com and buy cards for 5% off. It just requires one simple code.
Nerds.
That's it. Use that at checkout. You're saving real dollars. I'm happy to give you real dollar savings. You just need to put in code NERDS at checkout.
We're also sponsored by DragonShield.com, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you want, you can either go to the EU or the US link, buy some sleeves, support us, support yourself, and it's just good all around. Best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves. I didn't miss it that time. And this is the part of the video where I say there's a Moxfield ad somewhere in the video in the future, but you're not going to be able to guess where it is. And if you guess where it is, you're a liar.
Absolute liar.
And happy birthday. Everyone's birthday is today. This is going to be an interesting one because this is probably one of the spikiest, most competitive videos we've made in a while, because we're talking about ways to end commander games for 5 or less mana. I don't know if you're maybe in an arms race, or you're just looking to power up, crank up a certain deck, or you're just curious what some of the easiest ways to end games are in Commander. Mana-wise, we got you covered.
We usually talk about budget, and those decks usually are a little bit slower, but today we're just going to go full steam ahead.
If you're wondering, why would I want to end games for 5 mana or less? Well, there's a couple reasons. I mean, it's lower commitment on your part. You don't have to tap out for, 9 mana for Expropriate or something. We're going for 5. It's like half a turn, or in the early game, maybe you just steal a win early. The cards rot in your hand less if they're castable early or by themselves, or they're part of some kind of combo. They're not going to gum up your opening hands. They're going to be actually usable. So let's get to the first one. This is Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He's a 5 mana 2/4. He's got 2 black pips in his cost, and he drains your opponents and gains you life equal to your devotion to black. But notably, it's triple life gained and normal life lost.
We see Gary in low power and high power due to his cheap cost and just good overall. And so no matter where you play him, mid-game, late game, flickering him in general, you're going to get a good chunk of life. Him alone, you drain the table for 6 total and you gain 2. So
right. Obviously, that's not even close to a win condition. So we're talking about Gary as one of your late game plays. You're going to play him when you got 12 devotion, just finish everybody off, or 20 devotion, or whatever. In a mono black deck, that's not unreasonable. It scales with your devotion, and it's often going to be either the late game nail in the coffin, or just kind of like a mid game buffer, like, hey, I'm going to gain 24 life.
Yeah. Black decks always love to cram Gary into their decks, and I understand why completely. It just can end the game in one play.
Yeah, and if you want to spend an extra 1 or 2 mana, you can just reanimate them and start doubling up on the counters, or the life loss. It's going to be bad for them.
Another great way to close out games is these overrun type effects. One of them is Triumph of the Hordes. It gives +1/+1, trample, and infect to all of your creatures for 2 green.
Yep, Beastmaster Ascension is the next one. It's 2 and a green for an enchantment. Attacking players gives you quest counters. 7 quest counters gives you +5/+5 on all your creatures. And what's the last one?
The last one is Overwhelming Stampede. It's 3 green for +X and trample, where X is the greatest power among all the creatures you control. In combat-based metas, this is amazing, and for 5 mana or less, that's such a steal.
Yeah, these are pretty much the only overruns I would turn to for 5 or less mana. There's some of the cheaper, more efficient ones. Triumph of the Hordes is going wide. Beastmaster Ascension also going wide, and Overwhelming Stampede, you want to go kind of wide, less wide, and then a little tall.
Yeah, you have one Galt out and a bunch of 1/1s, you're set.
You're good. You don't really need a ton of effort with these cards. They're just going to take people out on the cheap. Let's go to one of my favorite cards, Living Death. It's 3 black for a sorcery. Everybody exiles the creature cards from their graveyards, sacrifices all the creatures they control, and then puts all the cards they exiled from the first part back onto the battlefield under their control. Now, this can easily be a victory without really doing much. You just need to fill your graveyard, play the game. You're a graveyard-centric, creature-centric deck, so you're going to have 10 to 20 creatures in your graveyard by the time this gets cast. That's not unreasonable on the later mid-turns, 8 or whatever. So you're going to deploy this for 5 mana. Obviously, it's a fixed cost, and you're going to have to prepare for it in the rest of the game and not pay more mana for it later. You're going to start looping things with this. Let's say you bring back 15 creatures. Well, if you have a Pawn of Ulamog and a Blood Artist and a Viscera Seer as those creatures that just so happen to be in your graveyard, because your deck is full of stuff like that, it's easy to assemble this critical mass thing. Sack all your board, get more dudes, sack all your board, everyone's dead.
I'm not surprised with how much you love this, considering you love your graveyard decks, but I love running this with Rise of the Dark Realms. Just, your graveyard's already going to be full because you're intentionally putting stuff in there, and then you just, if you can't bring that out because you don't have enough mana or something, you just bring out Living Death. It's just like the backup plan.
Yeah, I think it's a cheaper, basically just better version of Rise of the Dark Realms. You don't need their creatures. I'm building my deck so that I can win if I have a bunch of my creatures out. This just does that. They're going to get some stuff, but I think most of the time it doesn't matter, because if you have the Blood Artist critical mass kill, or you have other things like, let's say, Altar of Dementia to mill everybody out, Phyrexian Altar to start adding mana and casting more spells, things like Eternal Witness also just loop with Living Death. You can sack all your creatures for mana. After getting a Living Death back to your hand with Eternal Witness's enter trigger, then just cast Living Death again after your creatures are all in the graveyard and sacrificed. And then you just start over, and any ETBs or dice triggers or mana, you just profit. The game's over. There's so many different loops and kills you do with this that I don't even think you need Rise of the Dark Realms.
I mean, with graveyard decks, the graveyard's basically your second hand anyways, so why not have all of it on the battlefield at once?
I mean, a lot of the time, one of the things that kills people too is Gary. Gary comes back, drains for like 15, and then you figure out a way to loop Living Death and then drain them again.
Another absolute powerhouse is Chroma's Will. It gives flying, double strike, lifelink, protection from all colors, indestructible, and vigilance if you have your commander out. And of course we're going to do it with our commander out.
Yep, and the thing about this is it just skips combat. It doubles your board power. All your creatures deal double damage. They have double strike. And then it says, you really just can't block unless you have colorless flying creatures, which there are almost none of that see real play. So for every 20 damage you have on board, just straight up, Chroma's Will is going to turn that into a KO for a player. So 60 power, on board, you win.
I really love this card too because you can use it defensively, not that you're usually going to, but in the case of a board wipe, for instance, you can just make all your creatures indestructible.
Yeah, I had to use this on defense in a game against you where I had to give my things flying. I was like, I didn't want to do it, but it did kind of end the game in my favor. But mostly this is going to be an I win button. Once the board gets clogged, if games are not closing out, it's over. I know, Coalition Victory is like double strike lifelink, and Kathar's Crusade can really ramp up the power toughness. But like this is no blocks. You don't get to do anything. The game is over.
Give your creatures basically every keyword that you'd ever want them to have. Plus, what you get? Somewhere between like 20 and 100 life from combat?
Yeah, that's the other thing is you can't always kill everybody with this, but let's say you're going to realistically take out 2 people. The last person has to 1v1 you with the worst board state, because you're going to kill the 2 players in the lead, and you have 100 life.
Yeah, once you get that far ahead, it's so hard for anyone else to come back.
Right. Next, we're going to go to more of a one-on-one kill scenario. This is Embercleave. It's an equipment with flash that costs 1 less to cast from the 6 initial cost for each attacking creature you control. So any attacking creature you control satisfies our 5 mana or less condition, and it gives +1/+1 trample double strike to the equipped creature. After auto-attaching, that's a pretty good deal. So we're going to go for commander damage. All we need to do is have a 10-power commander and then play Embercleave. And if they didn't block, or we have enough trample, if it's more than 10 power, they're dead.
I love the flash on this. It's just so sneaky. It's just, I love those little gotcha cards and those little surprises. So Embercleave, I have to find a place for it in a deck.
I mean, it can cost 2 mana. You just throw some stupid tokens at somebody. I think a red-green deck can easily get a 10-power commander. There's a lot of ways between counters and landfall counters and +1s and just generic stat boosts. Even like if you've got an overrun already, it just double strike. Let's throw them into the ground even harder.
I like the idea that this is also like you're building your deck and you just happen to have a beefy commander. It's a surprise Voltron deck with just Embercleave if you let the damage go through.
Yeah, it's like something your opponents are going to have to keep in mind because they will just die. And I think it's not an instant win, if 5 mana kills someone, but then everyone's got to deal with it. Still, everything's still in play.
I mean, player removal is sometimes the most effective form of removal. So if you got to take out that one person, Embercleave's a great way to do it.
Yes, it is. And now we're going to get into the real spiky, the real dirty win conditions. This next one is Dualcaster Mage, which is 1 red for a 2/2. Flash, enters the battlefield, copy an instant or sorcery spell. And Twin Flame, which is 1 red, target a creature, and you make a copy of the creature that gains haste and then dies at the end of the turn. So we're going to cast Twin Flame, targeting, who cares, targeting anything. Then Dualcaster Mage, we're going to flash in response. Twin Flame is still on the stack, so it enters the battlefield. We're going to copy Twin Flame, which now gives us 1 Dualcaster Mage and a Twin Flame. Now the copy of Twin Flame targets the Dualcaster Mage, which is already in play, which gives us a Dualcaster Mage and a Twin Flame on the stack. And you're going to make infinite Dualcaster Mages attack everybody, and it is literally a 2-card instant win that requires 0 prep.
I think that infinite combos are sometimes thought of as like really dirty, especially if you tutor for them. But I think this one can be a nice little like hidden surprise in some decks, considering it's not always the one that people are instantly going for. It's just like, oh, if you happen to have these two cards, they're just really amazing together considering it's the infinite combo, but you can use each one individually too.
Yeah, Dualcaster Mage copies any spell, so you can hold it up and respond to a Cultivate or like an Expropriate or something and still have a gotcha moment. Twin Flame's a little less functional, but if your deck has creatures with ETBs, then it'll be fine. And there's other cards like this that also combo with Dualcaster, but we don't care because we're trying to spend 5 mana or less. So this is like 2 functional cards in your deck, assuming they are. Please play them if they're functional. And then they can be a huge boon out of nowhere if you stack one of them, save it for a rainy day, and then the other one comes off the top. All right, hear me out for this next one, because it does only require 5 or less mana, but it's weird. Divergent Transformations is 7 mana, but it costs 3 less because we're going to have 3 opponents. And it exiles 2 target creatures, and then you're going to polymorph, so you're going to flip until you hit 2 creatures, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. But that works for any player. We don't really care. We're going to target 2 of our tokens that we make through some means in our deck. And as it turns out, there's only 2 creatures in my deck when I'm doing this, and I'm going to get Leveler to exile my library and Thassa's Oracle to win the game immediately. I know. It's real dirty, but sometimes you gotta be dirty.
I think this like combo is super creative considering I've seen these 2 creatures but only in different instances. I've seen the Leveler in the Beamtown Bullies deck, so that's usually used against a different opponent. And I've seen Thoracle obviously in like Demonic Consultation, CEDH, and that sort of thing. So I think in this like kind of situation, it's such like a creative win out of nowhere that I think your opponents won't be like, oh, Thassa's Oracle, that's boring. I think they'll actually just be like kind of surprised.
Well, I also think that these combos that we're talking about that are 2-card combos, they're much different from the 1-card build a board first, then win cards. So obviously don't pub stomp. No one here was going to pub stomp though. We're talking about like high power games where this stuff is all accepted ahead of time. You're trying to power up your decks, crank it up to 11, throw some Divergent Transformations. 1-card, 4-mana kills in there at instant speeds.
We love the Rule 0 talk here, and we also love our like instant speed Thoracle Leveler combos too.
Yeah, when we're talking about spiky videos every 1 in 100 videos, we're gonna throw some at you. Just like we're gonna throw Moxfield.com. Whether you're building a janky, upgraded precon, or CDH, or just a regular high-powered, highly tuned deck, you got to be using Moxfield.
You can look at so many decks for any commander that you want that's been built on there, and it's so amazing. You can follow people too.
You can follow us. We work trying to get to 10,000 followers. What happens when we get 10,000 followers? I don't know. We're going to have a pizza party or something, just like in the old days.
A giveaway, a pizza party.
We'll give away a pizza party.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll send a pizza party straight to you. Just use Moxfield, all right? I don't need to give you a pizza party. Next, we're going to go to Mirror to Besiege. It's got 2 modes. Guess which one of these, after I read it, wins you the game. Either, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get a 1/1 mirror, or at the end step, if you have 15 artifacts in your graveyard, target player loses the game. It's the second one.
It's not the mirror one.
It's not the mirror one.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we're going to toss a bunch of artifacts into our graveyard, and we're just going to take out the biggest threat first.
Yeah, this does require setup like the other cards on the list. It's an alternate win condition. You need a really full graveyard. But one way to totally like shortcut that, if you're already playing an artifact deck, we're talking like you're playing 30, 40 artifacts in your deck. So there's ways to shortcut it, including Self-Mill with like Altar of Dementia, but there's also things like Krark Clan Ironworks, which sack an artifact, make 2 mana. It lets you dump all the artifacts from your hand into play because you're getting colorless mana, but you just sack your entire board of artifacts, go to the end step, KO the person, whoever is the biggest threat. Then you have 2 people who are not as big of threats. Maybe they don't have access to green for naturalizes, and then they're just going to get picked off one by one.
I've never seen Mirrodin Besieged in a game, so if I lost to this, I would be like, you know what, fair win. I'm happy to see this actually work.
Yeah, we're much farther away from the spiky 1-card wins. This is like, you have to earn this one a little bit more.
A card that's actually seen a lot of play lately due to treasure synergies has been Revel in Riches. It's 4 and a black that states that whenever an opponent's creature dies, you get 1 treasure. If you have 10 or more treasures at the beginning of your upkeep, you win the game.
Yeah, you set it down, and then you forget about it. The game's going to progress naturally. Creatures are going to die. Board wipes are going to be maybe uncastable, and then if you can fire off like 1 more spell that's just kind of a big push that kills some things, you just kind of win if you go to your upkeep.
There's so many ways to make treasures nowadays, too, like Grim Hireling and Smothering Tithe, that it's just so easy to get those 10. I think the hardest part is actually waiting to your upkeep.
Yeah, that's going to be the hardest part a lot of times, especially if we're in a high-power, spikier meta. This 5-mana enchantment might not make it, but it is a little bit low investment, and if you're building around it, it seems like a card I would just play. As the game plays out, you just get closer to a win.
Plus, with other people having like dying synergies, you just get free treasures, even if someone snipes it before you actually get to your upkeep.
Or you play it like it plays like a weird stacks piece where your opponents don't want to sacrifice their stuff for value because it's not worth giving you so many treasures. Next up is Mechanized Production. It's another alternate win condition. 2 blue for an aura. You enchant an artifact, and then your upkeep, you make a token. That's a copy of the artifact. But then if you control 8 things named that, you get to just win the game. So obviously we're not advocating for like, throw it on, is it Signet, and then wait 8 turns. That's not a good path to victory. I'm thinking throw it on Treasure, Food, Clue, or Blood, make 7 of them or have 8 of them already, and then you just win on your next turn. Protect it maybe. I did say the honorary 5th mana in this is just hold up an offer you can't refuse. So there's how you win with 5 mana. It disrupts one piece of interaction.
There's so many token synergies today, especially since like we were talking about Revel and Riches prior, but with all of them, like with the food and Lord of the Rings, it's so easy just to slap this on something and then forget about it, and in a turn, you can just win right out of the gates.
Yeah, throwing down an I win next turn is pretty powerful. It's obviously not as good as winning right now. But as far as spending less than 5 mana, it's one of the better options you can get. You just need to make sure your deck can make 8 things.
I waited longer to win the game, so yeah. I can wait till my next upkeep.
Like, this isn't even like a higher power card. You could wait 3 turns in a mid-power game. You still only spent 4 mana, and you basically just won. All right, next, easily. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Easily the lamest 2 cards on this list. First one, Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, 2 mana 2/2 that says your non-land permanents make an extra mana of a type they produce when they tap for mana, and you can pay 7 to look at the top 5 for a non-human, stick it on the battlefield, and put the rest on the bottom of your library. That's already pretty good. We're going to pair it with Basalt Monolith, the biggest snooze fest in the format. It's 3 mana rock that taps for 3, and you can pay 3 to untap it. Usually this requires getting a big mana boost and then having to charge it up by spending the mana later. Kinnan says it taps for 4 mana, then we're going to pay 3 to untap it, having profited 1 mana, and now I can just tap for 4 mana, untap, now we're profiting 2, to make infinite mana. This is very easy to abuse and win with, and also kind of a loophole in our little video thing. You only spent 5 mana to initiate, but you end up with infinite mana. So feel free to spend the rest of the mana however you want.
Yeah, and if you have any extra blue and green mana, you can activate Kinnan as many times as you have blue and green mana. You can also dump this mana into things like Torment of Hailfire, Walking Ballista, Crackle of Power, really anything you get with especially those XX spells. They're just amazing places to put it.
Yeah, obviously Kinnan's going to have this card in the deck if it's high power. This is more cards you can put into a deck together. I would never do that to your friends. I would never tell you to play a Kinnan deck.
But if you do, there's definitely ways to make infinite mana easily.
On the cheap. Let's move on to a CDH little spicy combo. This is Witherbloom Apprentice, which has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it drains each opponent for 1, you gain 1. And we're going to pair it with Chain of Smog, card you maybe didn't even know existed. It's 1 and a black. Target player discards 2 cards. Then they can copy Chain of Smog and target somebody else. Sure, I'll target myself, which triggers Witherbloom Apprentice. Everybody loses 1, I gain 1. Then I'm going to discard 2 cards, copy it, triggering Witherbloom Apprentice to discard 2 cards, and I'll do it again. And then I have the option to copy it, which I will. I don't need cards in my hand to endlessly copy this card. It's kind of just not templated in a way that they would do in Modern Magic, so it just goes infinite with itself. There's not really a payoff for that, except now with Magecraft cards. So Witherbloom Apprentice plus Chain of Smog, instant win.
I think innovating with these old cards that aren't worded like Modern Magic would be worded is so interesting, considering you get all these crazy combos that they wouldn't have thought of 30 years ago.
It's the same thing with like Chain of Vapor. I mean, I think they consider this a little bit, but it's just funny to go bounce my thing, sack a land, bounce my thing, sack a land, bounce my thing, sack a land, replay, storm card. Like, it's just super funny. So yeah, Witherbloom Apprentice, kind of functional on its own. It will sit and play. You can play it early. It doesn't have to rot in your hand, and it drains like residually. You're not going to get a ton from it. That's way better than Chain of Smog, which is actually just an uncastable, terrible magic card. You can't do anything with this card. That's the only problem is it is 100% dead in the absence of Witherbloom Apprentice.
At least with Witherbloom Apprentice, though, it's not like it is super threatening right off the bat. Like, you're not going to get it swords really early because there's going to be better targets for that removal from your opponents.
Yeah, or maybe you reanimate it a little bit later and just get frisky. It's like, oops, surprise. Fun fact about Chain of Smog, it does also combo with a card that doesn't qualify for this list. Professor Onyx, which has a Magecraft static, drain everybody for 2. That's going to do it just as good as Witherbloom Apprentice will, and it'll find it, so you get something for your extra mana spent, but that doesn't count. We're trying to play Demonic Tutor and put our opponents to sleep with Witherbloom Apprentice.
If you're looking for the exact opposite of this video, I'm going to send you right here. We're going to show you how to make your decks memorable and fun, but maybe not so spiky.
Maybe not so spiky. And remember, just because you can combo doesn't mean you don't have to.